Welcome back to the channel. My name is Tronage, and today we're going to be talking about what's that you hear? Could it be white noise, like as in white noise FPV? That's right. I got me some products from White Noise FPV. We're going to be doing a little unboxing and talk about them a little bit because I'm pretty excited about this stuff. So stick around. Alright, so I got a kind of like a build in my head that I want to put together. Essentially, what I want to do is I want to take some of the quad box stuff I've gotten and the drone drop box stuff I've gotten and mix that in with some stuff that I know I like and some stuff I want to try and kind of make a little experimental beater quad, if you will. And to do so, I figured this is going to be taking a lot of abuse. It's going to be crashing a lot. So I wanted to make sure when I built it that I made it a little bit more robust, a little bit more rugged, and I wanted to make things a little bit more secure. And that's where White Noise FPV comes in with their products of their little PCB mounting boards, as well as their race wire for attaching to the motors. But before we get started, if you're new to the channel, sit back, relax. This is really what we do. We do a lot about quads, multi-rotors, quadcopters, whatever you want to call it. But basically we talk about gear, we talk about equipment, we do some flights, we do all kinds of stuff related to the hobby. So if that kind of stuff interests you, why don't you hit that subscribe button? It takes a few clicks, it's totally free, doesn't cost you a penny. And while you're at it, hit that bell button. That way you'll be alerted when there's new videos posted and you kind of kept in the loop of everything that's been going on. Why don't you come in close, we'll do a little unboxing, and we'll talk about these products. All right, so here I have my little packet here from White Noise FPV, and let's open it up and see what we got inside. All right, so we got a White Noise FPV sticker. And then what we have here in the baggie, we should have one of each of their different pieces. So here we have the full lineup of the different products that I got here. So let's talk about this race wire first. So we'll set these to the side for the moment. For a demonstration purpose, I have basically an arm from a frame with a motor and a prop just kind of loosely attached to it. The first way that you could use race wire is, let's say you had a build that you did and you did a traditional build where you had the ESC that normally lives right here, your motor's attached to your ESC, and then the wires come off of the ESC going to your all-in-one flight controller or your power distribution board. But now you've decided that you want to go from that style to be a 4-in-1 ESC in your stack. You're not going to have ESCs anymore on your arms. Well, if you were going to do that, you'd have to then extend these wires. You'd have to solder on new pieces of wire, put a little shrink tubing, and make them longer. That's a whole lot of hassle and effort to do. Now what you can do with this race wire, now this looks like a big piece, but actually has little score marks right here. So each one of these you can break off and a new piece comes off. I'm not breaking it off though, because if I do, I know myself, I'm gonna end up losing that piece before I do my build. So I want to keep it all together, but they all break along these seam lines. And really all this is there's just 3 high copper traces that run along the PCB. And it actually is on both sides. So it has wire running on both ends. So it's basically the same as being a piece of wire. And the way you use this is you would take your race wire. I'm just going to hold it up like this. And for these wires, you trim them up a little bit because they're a little bit longer, but you'd line it up like that and you'd solder 1, 2, 3 down. So they're soldered down. And then you'd put 3 wires over here, 1, 2, 3, and that would continue on to your 4-in-1 ESC. So basically this PCB replaces where your ESC was and you don't have to worry about extending any wires or anything along those lines, which is really convenient. What's also great is that one of the problems with the way this is configured, just in general, is that if you have a crash and your prop bends in, if you see, there's going to be a point at where this prop will strike this arm. And if you have your ESCs out here, sometimes you put like a cage over it, or some people will take a prop and they'll cut a little piece of prop off and lay that across and tape it up so that it protects it, because it can get a prop strike. If you just have wires running along here going to your 4-in-1 ESC, these 3 wires, let's take my little skewer here, let's pretend that's a wire. You can see even if there's a prop strike, it can hit those wires. And what will happen is it'll actually slice those wires, because when this is spinning fast enough, it'll just cut through these wires. So this prop will cut through these wires very easily, but there's a problem. Carbon fiber is very electroconductive. So what will happen is now you'll have electricity shorting out through your frame. And I can't tell you what damage that'll cause. It could short out your video transmitter, could short out your flight controller, could do nothing, could cause everything to catch fire, could cause a puppy to die. I don't know what would happen, but it's something I don't want to find out what would happen. So the beauty of having a piece of race wire in that spot is that as this prop comes down, if it was to do a prop strike, it can't cut this. It's not going to cut this PCB. All it might do is it may scuff it or it may scratch it. So what this does is this prevents anything from getting cut. So even on a new build, it's advantage to put in the race wire, because you're going to put it where the props can strike, and then you don't have to worry about having to repair your wires. Because remember, not only do you have the damage that could happen, but if that happens, you're not going to be flying. Then you're worrying about doing soldering in the field, and you got to get all your shrink tubing and all kinds of stuff. And that's time you could be flying. So I'd rather just use the race wire and not have to worry about being down because I cut a wire from my prop hitting it. Now the race wire does come in 2 sizes. It has like basically a larger and a smaller version. And if you're replacing out an ESC, or you have a larger, arm, probably the longer one would make a little bit more sense, depending on how much space you have and how much you want to cut your motor wires. And the smaller one's more for a smaller build with shorter arms. But as you can see, even on this build as is, if I put this where these motor wires are, right like that, and I soldered that down, right like that, you can see that the race wire is still right where the prop strike would occur. So I could even just use this little small piece of race wire so that it would still protect where that prop strike point would be. And the advantage of that is you end up with a little bit longer motor wires, so that later on you have a little bit more to work with, because the shorter you trim them up, the more difficult I feel it kind of gets to working with them. I don't like my motor wires any shorter than this. So on this build, I probably would either use the shorter race wire, or what I would do is use the longer race wire and just leave myself a little slack with the motor wires by smooching them up. Yes, smooch. But you do like a little smooch, which looks like that. Do a little smooch. See, my little smooch. And now I still have some slack on my wires, but now I can use the longer race wire. And see, now it's the correct length. That's how this race wire works. Now the one thing you do have to keep in mind though, I did say that the carbon fiber is electroconductive. That means you can't just put this directly on this carbon fiber and hope for the best. You need to insulate it with something, a little foam mounting tape, or maybe wrap it with a little electrical tape first, but there has to be some sort of a layer between this and your carbon fiber. So when you go to use this, make sure you insulate this from the carbon fiber, and then you can wrap it up and do whatever else you want. But I definitely think this is an awesome thing, because it's going to keep you flying longer. You're not going to have repairs to do. You're going to be protected from the prop strikes, which happen right like that, and it's just going to make things last a lot longer. So it's definitely a great product. Great product. Now these other ones that we have, there's 3 of them. What these are essentially a way to put your Crossfire receiver and your TBS or Team Black Sheep video transmitter into your stack, which normally there's no way to really mount them into your stack. Normally they're just kind of floating around. So for this first one, let's talk about this first one. This first one What's great about this, it has a 20 by 20 hole pattern. So this is great for those really small, tight builds. And this hole in the middle here is actually where you put the Nano video transmitter by TBS. It fits right in this hole. And then there's little solder points. You just solder all those little points up to the board, right here, 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 and all these are on the top. And that anchors it to the board. Then you can attach your Crossfire Nano to it also. You take your little Crossfire, you take the little pins that came with it, you put it on the pins. Oops. I do it this way. Take the pins, put them through the board, and then take the Crossfire and put it on the pins. And of course, when you're doing this for real, you'd be soldering this all up. I'm just sticking it on here so you can see what it looks like. And there you go. So there would be the video transmitter would be down here in the bottom, and the Crossfire would be sitting on the top just like that. And now you have everything all in one little package. And what's great about that is the way they have this board set up, it actually has sort of like breakout points. And what I mean by that is everything you're soldering to the board, and then it takes all those points that you've soldered and moves them all to these pads on the edge. And there's 3 pads over here, and there's a spot for the VTX button over here. So let's go over these. Your camera is going to be wherever, the front of the quad obviously, and it's going to come in. You're going to have your ground wire, your 5-volt wire, and your signal wire for your camera. They're just going to hook up directly to this board. Over here is where you're going to, if you want to, put that button that came with your video transmitter. You can either put it on the top, or you can actually even put it on the edge. There is solder points on the side of the board too that you can solder to if you want to put on the edge. And then along this side are all the connections for your Crossfire as well for the VTX. So you have your channel 2 for the Crossfire, your channel 1 for Crossfire. Then you have your camera in. So this is going to go from this pin to the camera in pin on your flight controller so that the flight controller can lay the OSD onto it. The next pin down here is your smart audio. Then you're going to have your video in, so that's going to come from the video out of your flight controller back onto this so it can go into the video transmitter and send it out with that OSD overlaid on top of your video. It's going to have your 5-volt pin and your ground pin. And that's it. So it makes it such a neat, tidy package because you don't have all the wires going all over the place now. Now you have all your wires coming off of one little side. And in all honesty, if your flight controller is the next layer down from this or the next layer up from this, how long is your wire going to be? Like a ½ inch? Maybe, you know, barely anything. So it'd be a nice, tidy, tight build rather than having stuff just kind of shoved in there to look very clean and nice. So that's why I'm a very big fan of this. I'm actually going to be buying one of these Nano video transmitters because I think this is an awesome way to just mount everything in these small 20 by 20 builds. So these next two are kind of the same but kind of different. They do the same job in that they're trying to put a Crossfire module Nano and a video transmitter into a 30 by 30 standard size stack. So first, let's talk about this one. What this one does, if you notice, we look at this, something should look very familiar. You can actually take the Nano Video TX and pop it right in this hole exactly the same as you did here. You have all your breakouts, you have your camera inputs, everything's identical like it was over here for this video transmitter that you put into this spot. I think that's really slick and cool that they did that. Now, if you're not using the Nano, you can also put the 5-volt Unify on top of here. It'll fill this gap, see the white line? That's where it'll lay, and there's little solder points you have on there to lock it into place and hook it up and everything, and that's where it'll live. Now, for your Crossfire, it's going to live right here where it says receiver. That's where you're going to put your Crossfire. So I'll show you what that looks like. You just put your pins in the holes like that. You put your Crossfire Receiver on like that. And there you go. Now you have your Crossfire receiver. You have either your 5-volt Unify Pro or your Nano Video TX, all on a 30 by 30 sized plate that you can just put right into your stack, which I think is awesome. And lastly, we have this one. And this is because there's another version of the Unify. That's this one. This is the high volt. And this is also the one that has the MMCX connector. So this works with both of them. And it basically just mounts on the top, right like that. It just gets soldered to the board. There's no real connections to the board. For the connections for this one, you're actually going to use a little pigtail that it comes with. You plug that in, and you're going to use these wires to hook it up to your flight controller. But what this does do is a couple of things. One, because it's got mass and there's metal in this, it'll actually help a little bit with heat management because the VTXs can get a little hot. So it just gives some mass for that heat to go to. It's not going to really act like a heat sink per se, but it will have more area for heat to travel to, so it won't overheat as much, and it'll just make things a little bit happier and run a little bit cooler, I would say. And then the second thing is it locks it into place. It gives it a home. So you lock it into place. There's 4 spots that you're going to put solder. So I'll show you those right now. Right here, just this little edge on the front, right here, and right here. So the way you're going to do this is you're going to line this up, and you'll see on the edge of the board there's actually some solder point area on the edges. So you're going to line it up right like that, and you put a little blob of solder there, a little blob of solder there. Then you turn it over, you put a little blob of solder there, and a little blob of solder right there. And that'll hold this anchored to this board. Now note, because this is the MMCX edition of this video transmitter, it does hang over the board. See this portion here that's hanging off? That if you don't have the MMCX connector, that won't be hanging off. But because this is a bigger connector, it hangs off the board a little bit, but that's something I'm fine with. Then as far as the receiver goes, the Crossfire, where does it go? Well, you flip it over. There's your receiver spot right there. So the same as before, you got your pins, you pop it in, boom. There's your receiver attached. Those pins attached to these pins on the edge here, and you got your pin 2, pin 1, your positive and your negative feeds to hook up for your Crossfire. So again, it gives it a home, locks it into place, and you have a spot to solder on for your leads for that. So I think that is phenomenal. All right, so let's talk about this a little bit. So here's why I'm so excited about these. Every time I've done a build, your receiver and your video transmitter, if it's not a, one that goes right on the stack with little mounting holes, if it's like a Unify or a Tramp or one of those, it's probably just floating somewhere in your quad, stuffed in a corner. Maybe if you're fancy, you maybe print it up like a little TPU thing on a 3D printer and you have it mounted kind of sideways in the back or something. I don't know. In all honesty, I kind of feel like it's homeless. It doesn't really have a spot. It's just off in the corner, on the street corner, cup in its hand, jiggling it, asking for spare change. It's really homeless. It doesn't have anywhere to go. It can kind of flop around a lot, and it's just not secure. These products, for as simple as they are, which they are very, very simple in the sense of that it's just a simple design. You solder it on, you're done. It secures them. It gives them a home. They're finally living large. They're moving on up to the east side.
Where we're moving on up to the east side.
They're making it rain because they have a home in the stack. Now they're packed in, they're secure, they're soldered in, they're not going anywhere. You don't have to worry about them jiggling and falling out or anything like that. That's why I'm super psyched about these. And the Racewire, I mean, I've had prop strike on my ESCs. So if I had prop strike on my ESCs, I know I'm going to have prop strike on my motor wires. And the motor wires are way less durable than the ESCs, because the ESCs are the ESC, plus it had a cage on it and everything else. So when it hit it, it struck the cage, cut the shrink wrap, it did a whole bunch of damage. Luckily the ESC was okay, but if that was just motor wire sitting there like bare naked, it would have sliced no problem, no problem. So that race wire is going to come in real handy, especially like I said, the goal of this is kind of be an experimental beater quad that I'm not really going to care about. I'm just going to try to experiment and try out new things. And I thought, what better place to try out new things than to try out something new? And I'm really excited about this. I think the product is simple yet innovative. It solves a complex task with a simple solution. It doesn't over-engineer it. It's just basically a board. You solder stuff to it, off you go. Can't get much simpler than that. That's why I'm going to be using this in my next build. I think it's awesome. And I think you guys should check it out too. If you're going to be using, if you have plans to use the Crossfire Nano or any of the TBS products for their video transmitters, whether it's the HV or the Pro or the Nano, definitely check this out, because it gives those components a home in the stack where they should be really in the first place anyway. If you come to think about it, you know, they should be, you know, chilling with everyone else. They don't want to be left out in the cold. Anyway, my name's Tronage. Fly strong.